Claude Code has gone viral. One of the fastest growing apps of all time, reaching over $1 billion in run rate revenue within just 6 months of its launch. It's so popular, even non-developers are now using it for things that Anthropic never ever anticipated. I'm definitely one of those. I've started using Claude Code in Visual Studio, which is a programming interface for tasks I never expected, including even creating documents. But for most people, Claude Code still feels very technical. Going into a terminal, running commands, staring at a dark screen, it's a big barrier. And so Anthropic's team who built Claude Code has now built Claude Cowork. So it's the same agent wrapped in an interface that everybody can use. Your head of marketing, your operations team, probably even your dad could use it. Today I want to break down exactly what Claude Cowork actually is, explain to you how it works and why I think this might be one of the biggest product launches in AI for many years, and actually what it signals about where the entire industry is heading. This is In the Loop with Jack Hall. I hope you enjoyed the show. So let's start with what Claude Cowork actually is. Claude Code has been named one of the worst named products in AI because the code part actually just distracts from what the tool actually does and represents. It was never just about coding. It's a general purpose agent that just happens to be really good at coding, but it can do a lot more. Cowork isn't just this dumbed down version of Claude Code. It's literally the same agent, just with a completely new interface. Mindset itself has taken a huge amount of inspiration from Claude Code. The way it does its reasoning, the way it structures its tools and systems that it can access. So being able to provide this type of technology just with a new interface for everyone is going to be incredibly powerful. Because ultimately you download the desktop app. There's going to be a few different tabs when you access Claude. There's chat, there's Cowork, and then there's code. Obviously, the code is Claude Code, and Cowork is Claude Cowork. Now, on the face of it, it's like, okay, cool, what does this actually do? Well, it can do a lot of things that regular Claude cannot do, and Claude Code can do. So it can interact with files on your computer. It can control your browser. It can connect to external systems, as Claude does. But doing all of that in one place is where it becomes very powerful. In particular, I'll talk about why interacting with files is so damn important. So for example, instead of just chatting back and forth and then creating a artifact. So if anyone's used Claude, it's an artifact. The equivalent on ChatGPT is a canvas where, text appears or whatever you're creating appears. So it's where the chat just moves to the left and creates what looks like a kind of document on the right-hand side that you can interact with. And a lot of companies have spent a lot of time trying to define what this is going to be. And I think it's really interesting here, and I'll come on to this later, that actually perhaps just the winner of the new artifact or asset that AI creates and then you share with others is not a artifact or a canvas or a whatever thing that people are naming it. It could just be a local file that's downloaded straight onto your desktop. So yeah, Claude Cowork can then open those files on your desktop, rename them, create spreadsheets, navigates websites, it could send an email. And you might go, okay, cool, that's what a lot of these tools seem to do, but there are big differences, and I'll come on to exactly what those are and why it matters later. So to help understand why this is also important, I'm going to first start with how it actually works, like how you could use this, what you'd use it for. Because really one of the things I'd love for people to do is go and test this and really use it. It's not, like a new browser that's kind of interesting, but probably unlikely to make you change. This is actually something really, really powerful if you can systematize it and get it across all your company. So when you open Cowork, you're starting, I guess, with a blank slate. It can't see any files, it can't access the browser, it can't do anything. You have to grant access explicitly. So for files, you can give it access to specific folders, just the ones that you want to work with. For the browser, you can install a Chrome extension that lets you see and interact with any web app. For external services like Slack or whatever system that you're using, you can just connect it through MCPs. So that's just like the Claude interface today. And anytime it wants to do something, so change a file, interact with something, it will come and ask you first. And you can always say no. So you can stay in a lot of control. So I'll give you the most simple example, which doesn't really make it seem like super exciting, but then I'm going to build on that a little bit. So you might have a shed load of receipts in your folder because, you've been traveling with work, you've been doing stuff, and you've taken screenshots, you've got it on your PC or your phone or whatever it is. And essentially it's just a bunch of files with very unhelpful names like receipt1.pdf, March, GPG, whatever it might be. You can then give Claude access to that folder, giving Cowork access just to that specific location where everything's stored. And now you can ask, I have a receipts folder. Can you just rename all those files to, say, match the dates on the receipts? And it's super simple, but actually quite helpful for anyone that's had to do invoicing and get paid by their company for the things that they've already bought at work. But anyway, so the agent can just open that folder, look at each receipt, read all the content and information inside it to find the correct date, and it just then renames the files on your local device, on your laptop. If one of the dates might be missing a receipt, instead of guessing or doing something kind of weird, it stops and asks, this receipt doesn't have a date, what should I do? And it's because Anthropic, they've spent a lot of time on trying to get the model to ask for clarification, or this agent to ask for clarification when it's uncertain, rather than making assumptions that are just often crap. And it sounds like a small thing, but it makes a massive difference in practice. Now, you could then go further with this receipt example. You could then say, can you put this into a spreadsheet? And it will be able to actually do that. It creates an Excel file with all the receipt data, dates, amounts, whatever was on there, organized into columns just like that. And then maybe you don't want this local file just sitting on your computer. Maybe you want it in Google Sheets so you can share it with your team, and then everyone can access it from anywhere. So you say, actually go make this a Google Sheets instead. And the agent opens the browser, can navigate to Google Sheets, create a new spreadsheet, and start populating it with the information. You can watch it type around, control the interface, and now it's not quick, it's not instant, but you can watch it working through every single step. And at one point, it might notice that it didn't do something correct, so it has to go back and it fixes it. So it's checking its own work as it goes. There's been a lot of progress made on computer use in the last kind of 6 to 12 months. And then you say now, okay, go and take this and send it to this person, let's say Amy. And the agent will be able to open Gmail, click to compose or create an email, type in Amy in the receipts field, and actually pull from contacts. Now, an objection many people say is that this is just very slow. It's cool, but very slow. I could do all of it myself. And this is where Claude Cowork gets a massive amount of inspiration from Claude Code. Because yes, you could do something like that for a single task faster. And you're definitely faster than most agents right now for doing tasks on the internet, let's say. But the real shift is doing things in parallel. Because while Cowork is doing one thing, you could be just doing something else. So this is something that Claude Code got really, really right. You can create many agents that are doing many different things all at the same time. For example, you could have one creating a plan, one executing part of the plan that you're happy with, one writing tests to assess the quality of the either plan or the things that have been written in the code, all on one project, whilst another agent is then planning your next task. So that's what you can do. Now, you can do that on Claude today with many, many different tabs, but Claude Cowork is trying to bring that ability that Claude Code got so right into the main application. And what's really important here, and this is what we'll come on to and spend a bit of time on, is everything it creates, say every file it creates, it persists because it can be saved as a local file on your device, and you can just point it at that local file. You don't need to make a GPT or a Claude project, or you might create loads of, let's say, artifacts or canvases that you might put in a Google Doc and is then lost in many ways for context that another future use of AI could have benefited from. Instead, you can literally every file, save it, put it in the folder, organize it in a specific way, and suddenly the agent will then access it anytime. And this overcomes many, many, many big problems, which I'll come on to in a minute. Now, developers have been doing this for years, creating and storing files on their local device, committing it to the entire project. This is a very normal thing, and this is why I think non-developers are about to go through what developers have been doing for many years, and in particular with AI over the last 12 months, and they're going to do it at breakneck speed. So we're going to see a huge amount of change in how people generally work. Because I really think the difference between, say, chatting with normal Claude and working with Cowork is the difference between having conversations and continually building a system. And it's a real mental shift that everybody must really take on board, because the ability to create files and save them straight on your device overcomes so many big problems. So for anyone that's been using normal Claude, you might end up hitting context window problems, and you do the same on GPT. So you've put too many files in, you've had too many conversations, you've had too many iterations. It says I've hit the file context on it, which is a pain because you might be on a really good track and suddenly you have to go make a new chat. All of that can go away because you can suddenly just create a chat and all the files you've saved and assets and artifacts, put it into a folder, point Cowork at that folder quickly, and it's done. So super, super quick. Another huge benefit outside of context windows here is the way you can create a giant system. So a good example here with how we work. So essentially, if you create the right folder structure and give Claude access to certain folders to run instructions, and you tell it to always follow this folder full of the instructions, it will always do that. So it's like creating a giant project, but the agent won't just be stuck on one set of instructions. So we've got a folder which essentially is an agent. Because when people go, what is an agent, or what's the value of an agent? It's literally just a series of prompts that fire at the perfect moment to provide an LLM with the perfect amount of context to complete that task. So what you're doing by creating a folder structure is essentially pointing an LLM at folders full of information. You might have a folder called planner. You might have a folder called researcher. You might have a planner called presentation maker, whatever it might be. And inside that, there is a set of instructions, which is essentially just a document saved as an MD file. An MD file is just the best format for an LLM to read. But, imagine it's equivalent as a docx. You can download a file as an MD file. So you create a folder on your local device with a set of instructions, which are essentially your agents. Because when you say to an LLM, essentially go read that folder, it's going to use that context. You might then create another one called skills. Skills are processes that this agent can follow. So you might have one called a product requirement document creator. You might have another one called Python writer. You might have another one called email writer. So these are skills, which is essentially a document which lays out in a specific format how an LLM should follow a set of instructions. So as soon as it then understands that this person is asking for a certain task, it will be able to essentially access that folder with that skill and read it and then go, okay, I know I need to use this skill in this particular way. And it will follow the process that you set out. And all you can start to do here is continually build this system. And every time you create a new file, you can commit it to the right folder and an agent can then read it further and further over and over again. So you're creating a giant system here. And this is what we've done it from an engineering perspective. It's what we've done across the company. It is literally going to transform how people work. Another major mental shift with this here is just this idea of having many, many, many different Claudes or AIs all the time. See it as like tending to your Claudes or tending to your AI. Because instead of going super deep in one thing, you have many things going on at once. You're going to check in on each one of them because it might be going for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 12 minutes, 30 minutes on a specific task. And you check in to make sure it doesn't need to be redirected for some reason. And you're just doing this across all your different Claudes. And that's how programmers have been coding for the last 12 months with all these new AI tools. It's how I've been using different systems. And now Cowork is bringing that to everybody. One thing, again, I mentioned it earlier about skills. I think this is going to make things increasingly better for people over time. Essentially, skills is when the agent creates, let's say, a spreadsheet, it can load up something called an Excel skill behind the scenes, which is essentially a set of instructions that teach Claude the best way to create a Excel spreadsheet. Now, Anthropic provides pre-packaged skills. We as Mindset, we build skills all the time. But what you can also do is build your own set of skills with MD files. So you can start to build these skills that are very particular to your team and process. Now, that said, if you're just getting started, of course, don't over-customize, don't go too deep. Start simple. Go online and search for Cowork file structure, for example, and look online for the best way to create and set up this system. Anthropic have actually run competitions for programmers on the best system design, and that's where we've got a lot of inspiration from. So yeah, start very simple, install the Chrome extension, install the app, so you can actually interact, with web apps and do things, and just start using it and force yourself into this new way of working, because I promise you it's going to be infinitely better. There's a reason Claude Code has been so successful. So yeah, I think let's move on to a few interesting use cases and what I think is practical tips here outside of how this all works and why it's a bit of a mental shift. I think some of the really interesting use cases here is large processing of content. So there was someone called Lenin Rachitsky. So he's a big podcaster in the space, in the product management space. He basically gave it access to 320 podcast scripts on his laptop, which is about 450 to 600 hours of content. So a huge amount. That would take forever in, let's say, if you were uploading that to ChatGPT or Claude, because you can't drag 320 documents into a chat window. But actually with Cowork, you can just literally point it at a folder. Done. As another use case, one of the fantastic things about accessing your actual local files is the ability to produce lots of local files and then get AI to organize them better. So you might constantly be creating folders and systems, and this is why looking online for a really good initial system to structure this around is good. But as you create more files, you download it, you save it, add it to new folders, you can then just ask Claude to go and reorganize it, tidy it up, and make it efficient for whatever system you're trying to design it. So again, you're using AI to prune the AI system that it's going to be following. Another big use case here, I think, is actually starting to unlock things like APIs without being someone that's technical. Because most vendors, most technology platforms offer APIs that allow you to do really interesting stuff, pull interesting data straight into your conversation. It allows you to just do a lot of different things. And for most people, they cannot use those unless they're a developer. So suddenly a big use case that's emerging, and it started because of non-technical people using Claude Code or any coding tool for that matter. But suddenly with Cowork, because it's the same underlying agent, it's going to be very good at doing that as well. Another big use case area is browser-based tasks. So the team has really tried to be good at using the browser. I think there's going to be an emerging space to try and create general purpose agents. So an agent that will sometimes use skills, sometimes use browsers, to essentially be able to go and complete specific tasks, email things to people, and do things for people. And again, it can be slow and cumbersome, but if you don't see it as a function of speed all the time, but having many different tasks all happening at once, and you're just checking in on your Claudes or your AIs, then I think this becomes something that's more powerful over time. And finally, when it comes to research, I think it's really interesting because, if you do research on different, AI systems, you download the file, you might use that somewhere else, you have to upload it. Now you could just get it to research many different things, but smaller tasks, and just download it all into a project called Research on X Topic, and then start a new chat with zero context. So the context window is big, which means you can do lots of work on that research and point it straight at the folder. So again, I hope you're starting to see the compounding impact of doing tasks, saving files, organizing the files with AI, and then starting new chats and doing it again, but pointing it at that folder that you've created just then. It's really powerful. So finally, I guess you can see that I'm relatively excited by this, but let's go into why I think this overall is going to be a really big deal. So I think number one, it's a platform moment. And it really showcases the power of, I guess, nobody really knowing where things are going to go. When the App Store launched, the initial apps were beer drinking simulators, where you got the iPod and you pretend you were drinking a beer. Nobody predicted Uber or TikTok. Nobody had an idea what that killer use case was. And I think we're at the exact moment with agents. Claude Code was created for programmers, a very specific thing. And suddenly everybody loved it. And so they suddenly had to diverse and move out of just coding. So yeah, I think it's going to spawn a load of new potential ways of doing things. And I think the other big area, the reason I think it's really exciting is the exponential impact of this is real. A year ago, people at Anthropic were saying, By the end of 2025, most people won't be writing code. And I think it sounded very aggressive. I actually commented that it sounded quite aggressive. But many engineers are having most of their code written by Claude. It's certainly the case that most of the code that is produced at Mindset is now with AI. And I think that's the trajectory for coding, but the same thing is going to happen across all forms of work. If you listen to last week's episode on what trends are going to be there for 2026, a couple of them were everybody at knowledge workers becoming an AI manager, and knowledge work having a transformation akin to what programmers had. And this is a big reason why. See, I think often we think they think progress is going to happen in a linear way, but sometimes it can happen exponentially. I think this is going to be one of those instances. I think another big reason this is going to be so impactful is that everybody is going to follow. OpenAI is obviously going to copy this. Google is going to do something. Microsoft is going to do something, probably built into Windows and distributed to billions of people. Apple are going to incorporate it in some way over the next few months. It's going to be added into things like Adobe and other forms of systems like that. The entire industry is just going to converge on this pattern. And what I think is really interesting is actually that there's a lot of investment into things like the idea of a canvas or an artifact or a new, I guess, file type that happens within the AI system that you can create things with collaboratively with AI. And what's quite funny is that I think maybe what we've just seen is that simply downloading a local file onto your laptop, the oldest thing in the book, the thing that's been around for the longest, might just be that winner. I think this is going to be massive. I think this is going to reshape much of the industry. I think this is going to lead to a big transformation of how products are going to be built and designed. In short, I think the genie is out of the bottle. So yeah, in conclusion, I think Cowork is Claude Code without the terminal. The same agent, it's accessible to everyone, it works on your files, it controls your browser, run tasks in parallel, so you can have many different Claudes or AIs going at once. And I think this shift is going to be massive. And in particular, I'm really excited to see people start to think about files that you save in folders on your laptop being something that you spend a lot of time thinking about, the system and structure of that. And whether that is going to just persist for those that love, I guess, it might feel for some people somewhat technical, even though it's really not, because it's slightly different to the way they work today, or whether this becomes the de facto standard across the industry, or whether some people try to replicate the idea of files being saved in that format, but on an application that feels more like a G drive. But anyway, I think the industry is going to converge on this pattern. And the people who build intuition and new processes around this tool now will just have a huge advantage to how they work. So yeah, download the app, connect your folders, start simple, but please do start. This is In the Loop with Jack Horton. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I had a lot of fun going through it, getting really stuck into Claude Cowork, and I look forward to speaking to you next week.